not going to speak specifically about Yom Kippur. Obviously, that's the big thing that's on all of our minds. But we're learning the inyanim in Perek Yud that are connected. The dinim of Shemayim, the dinim of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So indirectly, it's all connected to the process of Yom Kippur. The one thing I'll remind people, again, that Chazal describe Yom Kippur as the happiest day of the year, not the saddest day of the year. It's a day of hope. The Ramban writes that Rosh Hashanah is called a Yom Din Barachamim. It's a day of Din that has Rachamim. And Yom Kippur is called Yom Rachamim Badin. It's Rachamim. It's a day of Rachamim that also has some aspect of Din. And Befrat, when Yom Kippur is on Shabbos, there's a special intensification of the Rachamim. And that is because Shabbos is a relationship of love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when there is love, there is a greater Rachamim. In fact, in Chassidish Sfarim, it's brought down that even though the Rambam writes that for the Aveira of Chilul Hashem, there is no kapara until death. Even Tshuva, Yom Kippur, and Yisurin are not mechaper and Chilul Hashem. But some say when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, it's mechaper even on Chilul Hashem, a special kayach of Yom Kippur and Shabbos. So although it's true that Shabbos doesn't seem to be so prominent, because obviously we're going to be fasting and everything else, but Lamaisa, the Kriyas HaTorah is adjusted for Shabbos. It'll be 7 aliyahs instead of 6. And in the tefillos, we mentioned, unlike Rosh Hashanah, right? Rosh Hashanah is both Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Chodesh, but there's no mention of Rosh Chodesh in the tefillos because Rosh Hashanah is mevatel Rosh Chodesh. I mean, the head of a year is memelo, the head of a month. You don't mention Rosh Chodesh separately. But Legabi Shabbos and Yom Kippur, Avada, both of them have a role in the tefillos. So although Lamaisa, we're not emphasizing Shabbos so much, but one has to know that Shabbos adds a tremendous amount of kayach to Yom Kippur itself. Now, just as a matter of halacha, it's interesting that this has a repercussion in Havdalah. Again, you probably went over this halacha. It's an interesting point that normally, Motzei Yom Tif, we don't make Havdalah over a ner because you're allowed to use fire. You're allowed to even light, not a new candle, but you're allowed to transfer fire on Yom Tov, so Memela, you're not moving into a stage where you can use fire. The only 2 times that you make a bracha Barei Marei Ha'esh is Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Kippur. So there is a difference normally between the Eish that you need for Motzei Shabbos and the Eish that you need for Motzei Yom Kippur. It says the Eish that you need for Motzei Shabbos can be either a candle that it was lit all of Shabbos, that's called the Ner Shabbos, a candle that rested on Shabbos, it was not used for Malacha, or you can use, like what we always do, Ner Shalosh Shabbos, I light a new flame. For Motzei Yom Kippur, the halacha is you only make Borei Morei Ha'esh on a Ner Sheshavas Mimlechas Aveira. That means you have to make it on a pre-existing lit candle or a candle that is lit from that candle. You can't just strike a match or turn on a fire and light it. This is a special halacha called Ner Sheshavas. Now, what would the nafkamina be between Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Kippur? Because there are 2 reasons why you make Borei Morei Eish Motzei Shabbos. One is that on Shabbos you weren't allowed to use this fire to transfer, and now you're allowed to use it. Number 2, fire was created Motzei Shabbos, so we give HaKadosh Baruch Hu gratitude. Now, if the reason is this is a fire that I didn't use and now I can use it, it would have to be a Ner Shabbos, because if it's a new candle, it wasn't usable anyway. So on a regular Motzei Shabbos, since Eish was created Motzei Shabbos, you can even make Borei Morei Eish over a new fire. Motzei Yom Kippur, you only have the first reason, that it was Shavas Mimlechas Aveira, So that's why it can't be a new candle. But it turns out that when it is Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Kippur, you can now use the other reason that Eish was Nibra Motzei Shabbos. So this year it's a little easier for Havdalah. You don't have to be Mechapes, a light that you would lit Meir of Yom Tov. You can use a new Havdalah candle. You don't need the halacha of Ner Shabbos, Mimleches Avera. Okay. Say again? Yeah, even the Chatchila, because as long as you have a Ner that you can make a bracha, so you don't have to be Mahadar to have two reasons. Either reason will be good enough. Okay. Yeah. So I think in Perek Yud, we're up to basically Sif Chaf Beis. And Sif Chaf Beis says, B'ayin Rosham Kol Ha'elam B'chol Asher Bai V'chol Ma Sha'isa Toiv or Ra Nirsham B'yosei Makam Sheba'ayin B'tsuraso Udiyuknai B'yoso Ayam. Yeah, I think we mentioned this, but it says that in a person's eyes is engraved, literally it says the whole world and everything in the world. Now, it's not clear what he means. In other words, the next sentence says everything that a person does, good or bad, is recorded in his eyes. His eyes are like a video camera of everything that a person does, and it remains nirsham. It makes an impression. Now, I'm not sure what the first part of the sentence, kol ha'olam, does that mean that in every person's eyes, like the whole world is in there, even things that I had no shaykhs to? China? I don't know. I don't know what the lashon of this means, but the main point the Gemara is making is that every single action, mitzvah, aveira, inaction that a person does is nirsham in the ayin. Meaning there's essentially a permanent record in the eye, even though I'm not consciously aware of it. That's why I think I had mentioned that there are Mekubalim who look in a person's eyes and they tell you all the things that you did. There is in Chachmas HaKabbalah a way of reading eyes. They even do it through pictures. Sometimes with Shidduchim, they'll say, send me a picture of the man and the woman, and the Mekubal will determine whether it's a good shidduch or not a good shidduch, based on what is rashum in the eye. Again, I can't vouch that any particular Mekubal is a baki in this or not, but there is such a chachma of chachma sa'ayin, and everything is nirsham. Now, what this also means, in a more psychological way, is everything we do makes an impression on us, meaning this is something that's a little frightening, because even if a person does tshuva, and a person is forgiven and accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the reishim of the Aveira, spiritually, may take a very, very long time to kind of erase, if ever. Meaning we know this, that a person is addicted to certain behaviors, whatever it will be. So even if a person only saw that, this is actually why Shemiras Einayim is important. Because what the eyes take in become a permanent part of you. You see something even once, it becomes a permanent part of you. We know that people under hypnosis, for example, can remember something traumatic that occurred only once in their lives that they had forgotten, they weren't even aware, and they may not even have been aware of. Like, when something had happened when they were one year old or something like that. Right? So they didn't consciously take anything in. But it's Rusham in the eye. And he says, so that's why a person has to be careful what they expose themselves to. V'zeh shemarin li'adam l'fnei ma'aseh. And therefore, before a person dies, Hashem shows them their life. Essentially, it is the video camera of your eyes. That's what it means. Hashem turns on the recording, turns on the video, so to speak, and you simply see everything that you've done. And that can be very frightening. Now, the idea of seeing it before you die is actually a chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because before you die, there is the possibility of tshuva, even in your last second. Meaning, if Hashem wouldn't show you this until after you die, at that point it wouldn't be shayach any union of tshuva. This enables a person in his last moment to do tshuva, and that's a wonderful thing, because even if a person does tshuva right before they die, if it is sincere, that is a tshuva. Now, is tshuva, someone asked me just again, it's a budgetary question. If you do tshuva, do you go to Gehennom? Is there Gehennom if a person does tshuva? Or to put it another way, even if a person died without tshuva, but if he did tshuva the last Yom Kippur or whatever, he's only going to go, that makes a very big difference, meaning you're not going to go to Gehennom for all of your Averos. You're only going to go to Gehennom for the Averos that you've done since your last tshuva. So the truth of the matter is, the Rambam seems very, very clear. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva seems to say for a davar pashut that Gehennom is only for people who didn't do tshuva. A person who does tshuva for the Averos, and he doesn't even say it has to be the highest tshuva, the Avera is forgiven, and there is no Gehennom. That's tremendous. That's a tremendous thing. I do tshuva, there is no Gehennom that is necessary when a person has done tshuva. On the other hand, let me point out that the Rambam has a very strict definition of tshuva, that you'll never do the Avera again. So it could be that a lot of things that we think is tshuva are not tshuva. But the emes is, if you read the Gra, you read all of this in the Gra and the like, and really the Mekubalim generally, they seem to say that even after tshuva, you still go to Gehennom because you still need to be fixed up. Yeah, God forgives you. Hashem loves you. You're connected to Hashem. But Lamaisa, in order for your neshama to absorb the light of Olam Haba, your neshama has to be in good repair. And Gehennom, remember, Gehennom is not so much the idea of punishment. Gehennom is the idea of the spiritual therapy that your neshama needs in order to be nana miziv hashchina. A broken neshama cannot connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that way. So according to the Mekubalim, there appears to be some idea of Gehennom even after tshuva. Now maybe it depends on the depth of tshuva. Tshuva has infinite levels of depth. Maybe the deepest, highest, most profound tshuva might get you even out of Gehennom, but a stam tshuva will not. So la halacha, it's hard to say what the halacha is. These are dinei shemayim. So we don't know what Hashem is going to do. Like the Rambam, tshuva takes away Gehennom. Like the Mekubalim, there may still be a need for tikkun Gehennom even after tshuva, in the gather of repairing the neshama, mezachech the neshama, purifying the neshama, so it will able to be makabel the Ohr Hashem. Okay. Now, Chaf Gimel, Sitra Achra. So again, we've had this phrase many times. Sitra Achra means the other side, and this is a term from the Zohar that refers to the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, the various kochos in the world that Hashem created in order to lead me astray, that therefore I exercise my Bechira and my Yetzer Tov. So ultimately, they're also on Hashem's side, meaning it's not like a koach against Hashem. See, Christianity has an idea of Satan, that Satan is an angel that tried to fight God, like the Tower of Babel, and he got kicked out of heaven as someone who tried to fight God, and he becomes, in Christianity, what's called the Antichrist, this power, demonic power, that is fighting God. and sometimes wins. So we don't believe that. The emes is even the koiches of Ra in the world get their koach only from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ein od milvadei. There is no independent koach in the universe other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Satan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzer Hara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Shadim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all of those koiches. Now it's true, the way Kabbalah describes it, they were created mi'achorayim, they were created from the backhand of Hashem, or the backside of Hashem, not the front, meaning it's an inferior type of creation. But Hashem created them. Why did Hashem create them? Why did Hashem create negative, destructive forces of evil? Because that is what enables Bechira in the world. If there wouldn't be things that attract me to the bad, then when I choose good, it's not really a struggle, it's not really a sacrifice. And it doesn't mean anything. Lefum Tzara Agra, the reward in Avodas Hashem, is according to the struggle. So there has to be kochos of Ra that pull me down. So then when I am miskaber over those kochos of Ra, I accomplish something. Like the Ramchal says, that's why it's not Nahama de Kisuf, it's no longer the bread of embarrassment, because I worked, I accomplished. So evil is actually a necessary evil. Without evil, there could not be real good. Real good exists only when there's evil that pulls you in the other direction and you're miskaber over it. Right? So we do call it Sitra Achra, we call it the other side, because it's not the side Hashem wants you to take, obviously. Hashem doesn't want me to choose. He doesn't want me to choose evil, but he wants me to be able to choose evil. As he wants to create a world where I have the power to choose it, and I'm even attracted to it. And then his hope is, I'm not going to choose it. Okay, so he doesn't want me to be Machal Shabbos, but he wants me to have the koach to be Machal Shabbos, or whatever the Aveira a person is struggling with is. So this is called Sitra Achra, and here he says the following. Yeah, this is from Mishlei. Tirdaif l'shalem li'adam takef kira asay. Again, it's hard to know what this means in practice. It is the nature of the Sitra Achra that as soon as a person does an Aveira, the Sitra Achra wants to... See, the Sitra Achra, the Satan, the Gemara says, is both the Yetzer Hara and the Makatrek and the Malach HaMavish. Now, these are jokes they used to make about if you got a speeding ticket in these small southern cities. So the policeman gives you a ticket. You then go to court, and the policeman becomes the judge. You know, so it's like he's the policeman, the judge, the prosecutor, the jury. You know, it's all the same person. So the Satan is very much the same thing. The Satan is the Yetzer Hara that makes you sin. He is then the prosecutor that goes to Hashem and says, this person deserves a punishment. And then he's the Malach HaMavis who carries it out at some point. So he's like, prosecutor. He's not judge, only Hashem is the judge, but he's like prosecutor. Well, he's enticer, he's prosecutor, and he's executioner. So the Vilna Gaon says here that because the Satan wants to only do bad, even though he's a shaliach of Hashem, he really wants to give you a punishment right away. As soon as you do an Aveira, something should happen to you. As opposed, he says, to the Midah of Taif, you don't get that right away. You get that only at the end when everything is accumulated. Now, it's hard to know what this means practically because Lamaisa, in the real world, Rishayim also may not suffer until the very end, right? Rishayim may have a very good life. This is called Rasha V'Tovlo. And in fact, they may get pleasure in Olam Hazeh in order that they should be paid off for the few mitzvahs that they did, so they won't get their sechar in Olam Haba. Tzaddikim may suffer in this world for the few averos that they did, so that they shouldn't get any Gehennom, right? The suffering may take the place of Gehennom. So the notion that every avera carries an immediate punishment, well, he doesn't say that it does carry it. He says the Sitra Achra wants to do it. That's what the Sitra Achra is urging the Eibishter to do. But he says it's the nature of Ra that there should be some immediate punishment. It's the nature of Taiv that Hashem waits till it gets accumulated. Now, the second thing we can understand a little bit more, because here's the idea. Let's make up numbers. This is just making up a number. Let's imagine every time you do a mitzvah, making up a meaningless number, you're entitled to 5 cents. So what's going to be if Hashem keeps on giving you nickels? So you spend this nickel, you spend that nickel, you'll never save it for something big. So he says, with mitzvahs, the Eibishter wants to wait till you've accumulated a lot of zechusim. And then, even in Olam Hazeh sometimes, he'll give you big brachos, as opposed to giving you little brachos all along the way. Because you get a little bit at a time, you get a penny at a time, so you lose it. Right? So he says it's the derech of hatava, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits until you've accumulated a lot of mitzvahs, and then gives you big hatavos, either Olam Hazeh or Olam Haba. Now maybe that's the pshat of the first part as well. That maybe the pshat is, instead of looking at the Sitra Achra as negative here, maybe this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hatava, that with Averos, you get paid a little bit at a time. In other words, you do an Avera, so you lose a nickel. So even though over many years I may have lost $1 million, maybe, I'm just thinking out loud, I don't really have pshat here. Maybe the pshat is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hatava is, you're losing a little bit at a time. The good thing about that is, that if you think about this, that's Ma'aru Yudah Tshuva. You do an Avera, you lose a little bit. Maybe you'll be married, as opposed to the notion, everything's fine, and then one day, everything is taken away from me. So maybe these two things are not a contrast. Maybe these two things are kind of the same idea. That when it comes to Ra, the Sitra Achra is Tavei as some immediate onish, which would mean a little at a time. When it comes to Taiv, the Eibishter waits till it's stored up. Maybe that would be the svara. Now, sof kol sof, though. The problem with these statements is that life doesn't work that way. In other words, I gave a svara and explained, why it might work. But l'maisa, it doesn't always work that way. Fakert. There are Rishayim that have wonderful lives and then they're destroyed. There are tzaddikim who actually are blessed as life goes along, right? So these are not universal rules. Again, this is in the Even Shelaima, you have to know, since the Even Shelaima is based on quotations from the Gra. So the Gra was not necessarily saying it's always this way, but he's saying that these are one of the darchei hanhagos of Hashem. That there's a hanhaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you get a little at a time. Now indeed, Chazal say this in a few places. By tsaras, for example. Right? We have 3 types of tsaras. We have tsaras of houses, tsaras of begadim, tsaras on a person. Now there is a mandiyamar that says there never was tsaras on batim. Okay, but Lamaisa, the Torah describes it. And we know that tsaras is a heavenly punishment for different averos a person does. The Gemara in Erchin says there are 7 averos that cause tsaras. and the punishment, Lashon Hara is the main one. So it actually says HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you in gradual ways. First, your house. That's kind of supposed to warn you. If you don't learn from your house, it then goes to your clothing, which is much closer to you. And then if you fail to listen to that warning, then it happens to you. Meaning, it comes upon you gradually, because each time you're given a chance to do tshuva. That's the midah.
It's kind of harsher because there are some points where you have to destroy your house, have to burn your clothes, whereas on your own body, okay, like leave for 2 weeks, maybe a month.
So you're saying
you're not going to die.
Right. So you're saying the body is maybe not as bad as the clothes, because ultimately you're correct. Ultimately, with the house, you may have to destroy the house at the end of the process, and with the garment as well, at the end of the process, you may have to sometimes burn the garment. So you're asking, Mashenkin on the body, so the body, maybe 2 weeks of quarantine, and then I'm out of it. It's a good horror. But apparently, a person is more sensitive about what happens to their body and the like. And Chazal do describe this as a notion of gradualism. Gradualism to warn a person a little bit more. So that's the idea of the Sitra Achra wants to be mishalem the Ra right away. The Taiv is going to be saved up so it can become a very big thing. That might be Olam Haba, or even in Olam Hazeh, like a big bracha that will come to the tzaddik or his children. But again, as I say, this is one of the darchei hanhagas of Hashem. In other words, these are some of the principles Hashem uses in interacting with the world, but it doesn't mean this is always the hanhaga. Okay, now another way of understanding it is, because again, the problem that I'm mentioning here is that it's not true that a person suffers for his sins right away. It's not true. But maybe, it may be true. Because there is, in the book of Iyov, there's an idea that says that even the worst sinner knows in his heart that he's doing something wrong. And therefore, even if he's prosperous and powerful, he is suffering pangs of conscience in his heart. And that's his onesh. His onesh is the suffering that is within him. That's what Iyov talks. Iyov says that the Rishonim have suffering. Now again, it's hard to know. Did Hitler, suffer? Did Hitler think, why am I doing this? Why am I killing millions of people? Stalin. Hard to know. It's possible. It is possible. We have no way of really knowing one way or the other. In fact, sometimes when a person is tortured inside, that may cause them to become more violent outside. The idea is because it's so hard to deal with my feelings. I want to take all the hurt and pain within me and give it to other people. Right? So, who knows? I don't know. I just don't know. But these are possibilities. That the einish of the Rasha is right away because the Rasha himself knows. It reminds me a little bit of a machshava from Rav Chaskel Levenstein. Very, very powerful machshava. I think I've mentioned it before, maybe even more than once. Rav Chaskel was the great mashgiach of Mir in Europe. And together with Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, when Mir was in Shanghai in Japan, he was the one that kept the ruach of the yeshiva, mamish, during the Holocaust, such a difficult, tragic time. And after the war, he came to the United States for a very brief amount of time to be mashgiach in Mir. He was mashgiach of Mir in Europe, and when Mir reestablished itself in New York, the American branch, so he was mashgiach of Mir. He couldn't stand America. America was not for him. America was too materialistic, too magushimdik. So eventually he went to Eretz Yisrael, etc. And he became Well, it's interesting. This is an interesting story. So logically, you would figure, okay, so he came to Eretz Israel. He became Mashgiach of Mir here. Actually, he wasn't. He was never Mashgiach of Mir in Eretz Israel. Why not? He was the obvious choice. He was the Mashgiach in Europe. So the story goes that I think Rav Lezer Yudel Finkel, who had been the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, invited him to Mashgiach in Mir. And Mir then was not like now. Mir then, we're talking about Mir in 1947 or 48. So Mir had like 20 people. I mean, it was not a big place at all. But, so there was an Avrech who was giving shmuzim. An Avrech was giving shmuzim to 20 people. Rav Chaskel did not want to take the position away from an Avrech. He thought the Avrech would be hurt. The Avrech would be embarrassed that somebody shows up and knocks him off. Even though Rav Chaskel was much older and much more well established, and he's like saying that, I was giving a chabura and then whatever, Rav Yoshev decided, there was no comparison. But still, Rav Chaskel did not want to take away anything from someone. So he went to Bnei Brak. He became the Mashgiach in Panovich. That's how, he was never Mashgiach in Mir. But being as it may, we have one vort that he said in America, even though he didn't stay in America a lot. But apparently he learned different things. I think this was the day that Babe Ruth died. Babe Ruth, great baseball player. And in the Mir, this is part of why he went back to Europe. Yeah. So in the Mir Yeshiva, this was a big thing. Meaning among American boys, even in Yeshiva, Babe Ruth's patira was a shame davar that people were talking about. Again, an Israeli doesn't understand this, but American boys, Babe Ruth, big thing. So Rav Chaskel noticed it. They're talking about Babe Ruth, like, who is this guy? So they said, Babe Ruth. So here is what Rav Chaskel said. Rav Chaskel gave a shtickle hesped for Babe Ruth. He said like this. He said, this fellow was such a famous athlete, such a famous player. He broke records. The first guy to have 60 home runs. Big thing. But what do they say at his levaya? What eulogies do you say about an actor, a millionaire, a tycoon, an athlete? You don't say, wow, this guy made so much money. Wow, this guy runs so fast. Wow, this guy can throw a football so far. You talk about, whether it's true or not, you talk about the chesed that he did. He cared about people. Babe Ruth Lamaisa was actually about chesed because he was an orphan. He grew up in an orphanage. So he spent a lot of time with kids and the like. So Rav Chaskel says the following. Rav Chaskel said a very interesting insight. Even the people, he wasn't saying Babe Ruth was a Russian, but even people who are Rishayim are makir in their heart what matters in life. They're makir. It's the kindness, it's the goodness, it's the compassion, it's the charity, it's the midos. So maybe they don't live that way. Maybe the whole thing is a lie. A mafia guy dies. So they're not going to say, wow, what a great murderer he was. He murdered 150 people without getting caught. They're not going to say that. They're going to say the tzedakah that he gave. So Rav Chaskel made a aside here, that even the Russia, B'etzem, knows what's important. The Yetzer Hara, maybe they don't live their life that way, but B'etzem they know. And this is what he based it on Babe Ruth, because he said that people whose whole godless is essentially in the Gashmias of the world, at the Levaya, they're going to be Mishabeach the Ruchnias, the spiritual aspects of it. This is 100% true. Now again, is it true? Is it not true? Maybe not. I don't know. But that's what they're going to say. Because they're makir. So, based on that idea, the Russia does suffer. Because if the Russia B'etzem knows what is good and what is not good, and his whole life he's living it based on what is not good, yeah, there's going to be some internal torment that goes on within the person. And in the book of Eov, that internal torment is itself described as an einish. Right? Very, very, very interesting in that way. Okay. So now let's do a Havdalah. Afal pi shelachar gezar din. Now this too. Oh, this is from Sefer Yaina. You know, the Gra, but there might be something you can look at. I think Art Scroll even, besides the Art Scroll Yona, I think they came out with a translation of the Vilna Gaon's Perush on Yona. It's a separate book. And the Gra in Sefer Yaina, which of course we're going to read on Yom Kippur, is very, very interesting because he interprets the psukim al derech haremes, that Yaina is the neshama of a person that tries to rebel against Hashem, and you can't rebel against Hashem. It applies all to the condition of the person who tries to run away. And in Sefer Yaina he says, once there's a gezar din, ein tshuva mayel la'atzilai min hamisa. Okay, this is actually a very shver sentence of the Gra. Gezar din. So when is there a final gezar din on a person, whether he'll live or die? So Pashtus, it's Yom Kippur itself. Rosh Hashanah, there is kesiva. Yom Kippur is chasima. There is a sealing. Right? That's why by Ne'ilah is the last second before the final judgment. We no longer say v'chasvein. Rather, just a little explanation. For this whole week, right, we say, even today, tomorrow morning, Zochrei. In fact, even on Yom Kippur itself, until Ne'ilah, right? So we say, Zochreinu l'chayim, melech havetz b'chayim, v'chasveinu, the Sefer HaChayim. Now you may ask a question, well, what does it mean, v'chasveinu? Wasn't our kesiva on Rosh Hashanah? So what am I saying, v'chasveinu? So the Gra, is not here, but the Gra says very pashut. He says, let's say chas v'shalom, a person had a negative kesiva on Rosh Hashanah. But during Aseret Shemei Tshuva, that could be ripped up and replaced with a new kesiva. So it's not the pshat, there's only a kesiva on Rosh Hashanah. The first kesiva is Rosh Hashanah, but then during Aseret Shemei Tshuva, it can be changed. Now, if it could be changed, what that would mean operationally is it's ripped up, that's a metaphor, and a new kesiva. So every single second until Ne'ilah, we're asking Hashem to, if God forbid our kesiva was not good, to change our kesiva to be positive. Okay, so that's why we're still asking for v'chasveinu. And of course, not just life and death, it also refers to every aspect of life, health, parnasa. That's nichlal in life and death. Okay, so comes Ne'ilah, and then we have what is called chasmeinu, the final gezar din, for good or for bad, the final gezar din. So the Gra says, once there's a gezar din, which would mean Yom Kippur b'pashtus, if chas v'shalom there's a gezar din lemisa, tshuva does not help after a gezar din. Meaning tshuva helps before the ksiva of Rosh Hashanah, and it helps during Aseret Shemei Tshuva, and it helps on Yom Kippur. But once there's a gezar din, for this year, my tshuva is not going to change anything. So people ask the question, so if that's the case, so after Yom Kippur, why don't I just do whatever Averis I want? Well, the answer is, because you got to worry about next year. In other words, you're right. It's not going to affect you this year, because you had a gezar din one way or the other. But let's say you had a good Gazar Din this year. When you have a Gazar Din next year, it's going to look at every... So every day I got to be as good as I can because I'm worried about the Gazar Din of next year, not the Gazar Din of this year. See what I'm saying? Meaning, if a person knew, let's say a person knew that they have a Gazar Din Lamisa this year. The person knew. So tshuva is not going to help, right? So doing tshuva is not going to cancel that Gazar Din of Misa. So could a person have the krum idea, okay, I'm going to die, and I can't change that, so eat, drink, and be merry. So why don't I do whatever I want? So the simple answer to that is, yeah, maybe it's not going to make a difference in this world, but Gehennom will be very different. Meaning to say, if you have a Gazar Din Lamisa, what Gehennom will you get will be very much affected by the extra Averas that you do. So just because of Gehennom, it doesn't make sense. And if you don't know you're going to die this year, you got to be worried about next year's Gazar Din, because that's going to be part of the cheshbon. Okay. But the Gemara's statement is, therefore, once there's a Gazar Din, Tshuva is not going to help you. So first of all, he doesn't say beferish, when is there a Gazar Din? I put in Yom Kippur. L'maisa, as you know, the Zayar takes the position that Hoshana Rabbah is really the Gazar Din in the following way. The way it describes it is, Rosh Hashanah is a kesiva. Hashem writes it down. Yom Kippur is a chasima. He signs it, whatever that means. But it is not delivered to the shluchim to carry out until Hoshana Rabbah. Again, we're using human metaphors, which means it's like a signed check in the Ribbon Shalom's desk. Now, even if I write you a check for $100 and I sign it, but it's in my desk, even though I signed it, I can still rip it up. Once I give you the check, well, theoretically I could stop payment on the check, but I'm liable on the check. If I stop payment, but I gave you a check, you can sue me for the check, meaning the check is now your property. All right, so the Gra is not addressing Hoshana Rabbah here. In other words, when he says Gazar Din, does he mean Yom Kippur? Does he mean Hoshana Rabbah? Some even say there's a delay of final din till Hanukkah. It's kind of, we keep on giving you more time. But at some point, there is a finality in Gemara Din. And Gemara Din cannot be Mavatel, Tshuva rather, cannot be Mavatel, a Gazar Din of Misa. So, you have to see if this is true, because the truth of the matter is, it's at least a machlokes in the Gemara. The Gemara brings Rav Yitzchak, who says, Yafet sa'aka b'choles, bein kodem Gazar Din, bein liachar Gazar Din. Rav Yitzchak says beferish, tzaka. Tzaka is tefillah, calling out to God. Tzaka helps before a Gazar Din, and it helps even after a Gazar Din. So, Vadai, the statement of the Gra, is not going like Rav Yitzchak, that's for sure. Okay, there are other mandiyamrim in the Gemara. But the other thing to keep in mind is that the Gemara says there's also a nafkamina between Yochid and Sibor. That even if you say a Gazar Din on a Yochid cannot be Nikra once it was finalized, but a Gazar Din on a Tzibor can always be Nikra. Now, a Gazar Din on a Tzibor doesn't mean my individual Gazar Din will be Nikra if I daven with a minion, because that's still a Gazar Din of a Yochid. But, I mean, what happens? I mean, I don't know if this is discouraging or encouraging. What happened in October 7 was Vaday a Gezerah on the Tzibur. It plunged the whole nation into war. And that could have been Nikra. Even after Yom Kippur, that could have been Nikra. Hoshana Rabbah. I mean, it's scary. I mean, the thing happened the day after Hoshana Rabbah. The day after. Hoshana Rabbah, it still could have been Nikra, even if it was already finalized. It's a very, very scary thought. How much power we had and we didn't realize. We didn't realize that we had it. We didn't realize such a thing was going to happen. Okay, but be it as it may, so these are two limitations, I think, on the Gra's statement. The Gra's statement that once there's a Gezar Din of Misa, Tshuva cannot help to cancel the Misa. So number one, like Rav Yitzchak, that's not emes, because he says, Yafet Saika B'chol Eis, Bein Kaidem Gezar Din, Bein Liachar Gezar Din. And number two, it does not apply to a gezerah on a tzibur. Again, the Gra does not mention either of those qualifications here. Of course, what's a tzibur? I mean, they also get definitions. Is it tzibur a minyan? Is it tzibur a city? Is it tzibur a country? It's not bora, what is called tzibur versus yachid. But there is such a chiluk that the Gemara makes. Okay, so I think this statement, the afal pi part of the statement, is a little bit schwer, that you need to consider the other things, but let's go with what the Gemara himself says. He says, even though after the Gezar Din, tshuva does not help to save you from Misa, but he says, Mikol Makayim, Mayel Lahalaisai Mi Gehennom, Achar sheyisbal hakol. So this is an important point. Tshuva, even after a Gezar Din, can take away your Gehennom. Right? A person has a Gezar Din that they're going to die. The Gra says that's irrevocable for a Yachid. Tshuva is not going to help you on that. A bazai, why should I bother to do tshuva at that point? The answer is tshuva will help you on the Gehennom for your Aveira. So it behooves a person to do tshuva even if it's not going to be matzalim from Misa. Now, what is his lashon though? He says it'll take him out of Gehennom achar sheyispel hakol, after he suffered everything he needed to suffer. Well, I mean, I don't need tshuva for that. I mean, if the pshat is, it gets me out of Gehennom after I serve my time, so I served my time. What's the lashon that it'll take me out of Gehennom? Achar sheyisbael hakol. And if I didn't do tshuva, it's also achar sheyisbael hakol, right? The rule that you normally don't stay in Gehennom more than 12 months, that applies to a guy who didn't do tshuva. So again, I don't really understand the last three words there, but the overall yisaid is that tshuva cannot be mevatel a gezar din of misa, but tshuva can take a person out of Gehennom or prevent a person from going to Gehennom. Okay, and this is again from the Perish and Sefer Yaina. One second here. By the way, this thing, again, who knows, I wouldn't automatically put credence in this. This idea that the eye records, we said before, the eye records everything. So I see a footnote from the Mechaber of the Ibn Shelaima that he says, Shamati, kishereitzim leida esareitzeach mihu, when the police are trying, somebody was murdered, and the police are trying to figure out who the murderer was, they can get a picture of the Rotzeach from the eyes of the Nirtzach al yidei meleches hafotographia, through some process of photography. Again, this, I think this was a pseudoscientific statement. I'm not aware of this ever being done, but apparently it was based on this. People were saying, oh, you can do it scientifically. You can get a picture of the guy from the eye. Again, as far as I know, a makul might do it, but the police department will not be able to work in that particular way. Okay. All right, Sif Chafhei. Mi shemeis kaidem shalosh esrei shana, hu al pi mishpat beis shel mayla alavainas abayis. Okay, so here the text is the following. This goes to the idea. I think we may have looked at this a while ago, but not in order. That the idea is that, what do we say? A person is a gadol when they're 13 years old, and a girl is a gedola when she's 12 years old. By the way, just as a little aside, let me just make the basic halachic point, that the halachic definition of becoming a gadol is not automatic by age. It also requires a certain developmental puberty. It actually is Yud Gimel Shanim and 2 Cyrus, 2 pubic hairs. And for a girl, same thing. Technically, a person who is 13 who doesn't have the Cyrus is still a katan. But Rava says in Maseches Nida that we're somech on a chazaka, a general fact, that rove kids who reach the age of 13 have shtei Cyrus. Memela, the poskim say the following idea. This is an interesting idea. That we're only saimech, this is called the chazaka de Rava. We're only saimech and chazaka de Rava legabe mitzvahs de Rabbanan, and we are not saimech on the chazaka de Rava legabe a mitzvah de Araisa. So, if a kid became bar mitzvah, let's say, the day before Rosh Hashanah, and we now want him to be Tokeya Shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, he should not be Tokeya Shofar unless we know that he has Cyrus, or Baidakim, whatever it is. He shouldn't make Kiddush. Well, Kiddush should be an interesting shayla because the Magen Avram says, Dairaisa, you're Yaitse Kiddush with Vayachulu and Shmona Esrei. So you have to get, in other words, every single mitzvah you'd have to look. So we let him be Mizamein because that's not a Doraisa, Zimun. Right, we let him do that. We let him read the Torah, because Kriyas HaTorah is also not Doraisa. But Parshat Zachor, you shouldn't let him read, because you have to be Chayshish, maybe he's still a Katan. So the Rav, or the Paisek, has to very carefully differentiate between what is Doraisa, what is Rabbanan. And the only time you know for sure that he has Cyrus is if he already starts shaving or there's facial hair. Then I know if there's facial hair, then there are the Shtei Cyrus. That's called Chazaka de Rava. For a girl, it's the same thing. A girl is still a katana, unless she has Cyrus. Okay, but be it as it may. A gadol is Yud Gimel with Cyrus. But then we have another shiur of Ben Esrim, and that is Yud Gimel is the age in which you're chayiv and based in Shalmata. I do Averas. But B'dinei Shamayim, Hashem does not punish you until you're 20 years old. So nobody is chayiv kares, and there's no onish b'dei Shamayim till the person is 20. So B'dinei b'nei Adam, you're chayiv at Yud Gimel. Dinei Shamayim, you're chayiv only at 20. So now, what happens when a kid, Rahman al-Islam, dies before the age of 13? It can't be because of his Averas, because he's not chayiv b'dinei Shamayim and he's not chayiv b'dinei Adam. So how would we explain the deaths of children below the age of 13? So the Gra says, if someone dies before the age of 13, this was a psak of the Beis Din Shel Maila, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of the sins of his parents. Again, this is a hard thing to say. And that is that until a child is 13, they're considered to be batel to their parents. And Memela, the Einish of Misa, is not because of the kid, it's because of the parents. Again, you have to be very careful. You wouldn't automatically tell a grieving parent such a thing. But Lamaisa, the Rishonim say that this is one of the pshatim in the bracha that we recite. Some actually say it with Shem Hashem. Some say it without Shem Hashem. That when your child becomes bar mitzvah, you say, Baruch Shepitzarani. Blessed is God that has made me pator, exempt, may own show shelzeh, from his punishment. So what is the father saying? Baruch Hashem, I'm pater from his punishment. What does that mean? So there are two pshatim. One is the father's kind of saying, oh, when he was a katan, I was responsible, so Hashem will hold me accountable for his mistakes. Baruch Hashem, he's on his own. I'm not responsible anymore. That's one way of looking at it. In other words, the father is saying, Baruch Hashem, it's his problem, not my problem. Okay, that's a little selfish, but okay. But some learn the other way around. The father is saying, Baruch Hashem, that my child will no longer be punished for my averos. Because only a katan can be nenash for the averos of a parent. A gadol is not nenash for the averos of a parent. That's what the Torah says. When it says, children shall not die, lo yimsu avais al banim ubanim al avais. Parents do not die for the sin of a child, and a child does not die for the sin of a parent. Ish becheta yumas, a person only gets punished for their averos. That's talking about banim gedolim. Banim ketanim chas v'shalom can be nenash. And therefore, Baruch Sheptarani is Baruch Hashem, my child will no longer suffer because of it. Now, I also want to add that although the Gra here does say that a child who dies before 13 is because of the averos of the father, he does not mean that's the only reason. That means it is a reason, meaning if this was an einish for an avera, it's not the avera of the kid, it's the avera of the father. But I'll give you at least two other possibilities that Chazal identify. One possibility is like Ben Soyer Umayra, who also is not bar mitzvah, that even though Hashem is not punishing the child for his averas, but maybe there's a need in Al Shem Seifai that eventually he'll become a Rasha, so Hashem says Yom Sakai v'al Yom Chayev. That's one idea. And the third idea is nobody's being punished at all. Every neshama has a certain number of years that it was given. We don't know why. Some neshamas were only given 5 years. Some neshamas were given 6 months. In other words, it's not an onesh for carrot. He lived his whole life. This was the life he was given. Now, it's shayach with tshuva, maybe to get an extension. But there is a natural life. In fact, this is what the Sfarim say is the answer to the famous question. On Rosh Hashanah it says, tzaddikim are written and sealed for life. What does that mean? Tzaddikim die eventually. What? The year that Rav Chaim Kanevsky died, was he inscribed on Rosh Hashanah in the book of life or the book of death? What does it mean? The year that the tzaddik died, he was not inscribed, we would think, in the book of life. So how could it be said that tzaddikim are inscribed in the book of life? So the Maral says very pasha. The book of life doesn't mean you'll live. The book of life is you will complete the years that were given to you. So even if a guy died the day after Rosh Hashanah, that's called nechta v'nechtam l'chaim. That he is zocha to be mamale shnaisa. Now, this is an important thing, because otherwise a person might say, oh, somebody died after Rosh Hashanah, he must be a Rosh Gomor. God forbid. No. You don't know. Maybe he died because he was a Rasha Gomer who was Nechtam Lamisa. Or no, he was Nechtam L'chaim to be Mamale Yamav V'Shnaysev. You see? So you just don't know. You can't judge based on when people died or whatever it would be. Now, just to be mashlam, what about the opposite question? All right, so this answers the question, how can I say tzaddikim are inscribed for life if they die? So the answer is, they're given the zechus of being mamale yamav v'shnaysev. What about the idea of the Russia? The Russia is inscribed for death. The Russia might live more than a year. I mean, Hitler, what happened in 1939 and 1940 and 41 and 42, whatever the Hebrew dates were, 43 and 44. Was he nechtam l'chaim? What does that mean? He wasn't nechtam l'misa? So here they say like this. They say nechtam l'misa also does not mean he's going to die. It means Hashem is misalek the hashgacha pratis that might protect a person. Meaning Hashem is basically saying, I am not going to do anything to protect you. Which means you are left to the mikre hateva. You're on your own. Meaning, it's a matter of luck. Maybe you'll make it, maybe you won't. The Eibishter is not going to take any step to give you shmira. And that's called Misa. Misa is a siluk of hashgacha that makes you vulnerable to whatever happens. Maybe somebody will shoot, maybe you'll be lucky and the guy who shoots you will miss. Hitler happened to be lucky in that way. There were assassination attempts on Hitler, and they failed. What happened? A general. It was a suicide bomb, essentially. He would have killed himself as well. A big Nazi general came to a meeting and he brought a briefcase with a big bomb, and he put it very close to Hitler. But the problem was, it was a big oak table with thick legs, and he put it on one side of a leg. And in those days, furniture was sturdier than it is today. The old German furniture wasn't like this type of thing, and the thing exploded, and the table absorbed most of the bomb. So Hitler had mazel, but it wasn't. According to this, it wasn't a hashgacha mazel. Mikri teva. Teva can work this way, can work that way. Hashem was not directing it. To say, my own aunt, I had an aunt, Allah Shalom, who, again, is very, very scary. She looked German. I mean, she looked blonde hair. So she passed the war years by impersonating a guy, as Jews managed to do. And she had a 4-year-old, my cousin, who's also not alive anymore, son with her. And the son's language was Yiddish. I mean, you can imagine the fear, the pachad. You have to train your 4-year-old never to say Yiddish, never to take a shower because they'll see bris milah. Nakedness, every little thing. You have to be so careful. In your sleep, don't say a Yiddish word or a Hebrew word because people are watching you. But she passed herself off as a non-Jewish woman, and she was in the employment of a Nazi, a Gestapo person. She was the cook. And one day, they had a very important guest coming to dinner. Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shemo, was a guest. And she said, she was so close to Hitler, she was serving food, she could have taken a knife and she could have stuck it in his heart. She said she didn't do it because she was afraid of what they would do to her son if she would have been successful or whatever, or even more so if she wouldn't have been successful. What would have happened? They might have tortured, they might have done unbelievable things. To her, they probably would have killed her right away, but to her child, they might have done unbelievable torture. So she said it was a very hard decision for her, but she made a decision she was not going to stab him. Can you imagine these things here? unimaginable, unbelievable types of things. But this is what the Svarim say. When the Svarim say, Nechtav l'chayim doesn't mean that tzaddik is going to live. But he'll be mamale yamav u'shneisa, which might just mean one day. And nechtam l'misa means that the Eibishter is masalik hashkocha and leaves the person to mikrei hateva, which might actually hold out for years. He may have good luck for a lot of years, but it's kind of luck. It's not any hashgacha pratis. Okay, so be it as it may, therefore, a person who dies before 13, the Gra says, is because avaynais avaisav, although I gave you other reasons. And if he dies after 20, that's the din shamayim for his aveiros. Now, I do want to point out another thing the Gra says. He doesn't say it. Well, actually, he says it in the next sif. So I need to bring that in. The statement that based in Shalmaila is not ma'anesh until a person is 20 does not mean only for the averos he did after 20. Meaning, once you're 20, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be ma'anesh you even for the averos you did from 13 to 20. Meaning, he's not going to be ma'anesh you before the age of 20 for your averos, because you're immature, you can do tshuva. But if you didn't do a proper tshuva for those averos, when you hit 20, he'll be toveh you for everything. Okay, that's an important point. So it's not like you're patra midine shamayim from 13 to 20. It just means you're not going to get the punishment during those years. But once you're 20, Hashem will hold you into account for everything from Yud Gimel. Okay, that's what he says in the next sif. So, therefore, you die before 13, it's avayin avaisav. You die after 20, it's for your averos, din shamayim. And that will include what you did from 13 onwards. So now we have a little bit of a puzzle. How do we explain children who die between the age of 13 and the age of 20? It can't be because of avayin avaisav, because once you're 13, you don't get punished for avayin avaisav. It can't be for avaynais atzmai, because avaynais atzma, you don't get nenash until you're 20, although once you are 20, you'll be nenash alakal. So Lamaisa, you could explain it with what I said, that this was his allotment. He was only given 15 years. Or maybe a Nidin al Shem Seifai. But the Gra doesn't really give you an answer. The Gra says, Al Zen Emar, in a case where somebody dies between 13 and 20, it's a getter of a teku, because the pasuk says in Kayheles, Yesh nispe b'loi mishpat. Sometimes people die without justice, meaning without a reason that we understand, meaning we don't have a reason. So it's so interesting. It's an amazing thing that, most people would think intuitively that a child's death is like the biggest kasha. He seems to say, just not getting emotional about it. Oh, if the kid dies before 13, we have an explanation for that. And if the person dies after 20, we have an explanation for that. The tzorech iyun is bedafka between 13 and 20. That's a tzorech iyun. And that's the pasuk, that sometimes there are deaths that we can't explain. Everything else he can explain. But a death between 13 and 20, we cannot explain. But he says, but obviously Hashem has reasons. Meaning, there are reasons we can't always know. So when it says, Yesh nisba b'loi mishpat, it doesn't mean it is a death without justice. That would imply Hashem is wrong. Rather, it means there's a death without a justice that we can comprehend, but there is obviously some tzedek, which means the Gra himself is telling us the Eibishter has cheshbainos that go beyond whatever klolim we try to give. Right? We try to give all of these different rules, and the short answer is you're not covering all of the bases. There are many, many bases and many, many ideas that go beyond whatever we're able to say. Okay, so we say a few things. We identify some klalim in the Mishpat Hashem, but we know that the Mishpat Hashem is much, much more complicated and intricate than whatever klalim we bring up, and this is Yesh Nisba B'lai Mishpat. I believe, if I'm trying to remember, I don't really know the whole significance of the Maisa. They say Rav Yisrael Salanter once lost a very, very close chaver, a younger person who helped him tremendously in Kiruv and in Musar, really a right-hand man. And the person was a big, big tzaddik, obviously, and it was a sudden death. And Rav Yisrael Salanter got up to give the hesped. And all he said was these words, Yesh nisbeh, like 100 times, Yesh nisbeh b'loi mishpat. Meaning, we don't understand how Hashem can do this. We don't understand. So it's a bracha. And he brought the whole tzibur to tremendous bechiyas, tremendous crying and sobbing. Yesh nisbeh b'loi mishpat. Okay. All righty, we'll stop here. I want to wish you, everybody, a Gemar Chasima Taiva. May we be Zeicha to a Tshuva Shelaima. May we be Margish, the sweetness of being connected to Hashem. You know, it's an amazing thing. You know, the English for Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. So, you know, we don't darshan English terms. Well, I'll give you two drushes we have on English terms, but atonement is very interesting. If you divide it into 3 words, it's 2 words, but at one mint, that kapara is becoming one with Hashem. At one mint, we become nisachet with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Shuva is. Shuva Elai, Hashem says, return to me, v'yashuva aleichem, and I will return to you. We'll be connected. At one mint. I don't know if that's the intention, but that's an interesting drasha on the English. Another good drasha on English is, in Hebrew, you know, we call the Dead Sea Yam HaMelech, the salt sea. That's obvious because it has that tremendous salt content from stone. That's where stone was, etc. But in English, it's called the Dead Sea. And they say, because, the simple reason why it's called the Dead Sea is because no fish can live in it, because the salt and the sulfur is too much. But the Bali Musar, modern Bali Musar, like to say a little word on this. They say that the Dead Sea only receives, it doesn't give, meaning to say no water flows out of the Dead Sea. That's a Kinneret. Yam Kinneret receives water, and then water flows, the Yarden flows from Yam Kinneret. So it's both a receiver and a giver. The Dead Sea only takes. It doesn't give. So, if you're only a taker, not a giver, you're dead. You're not alive. The meaning of being alive, chayim, chiyus, is to be a no-saint, to be a giver. So that's also a nice drasha based on the English term of why it's called the Dead Sea. That's called dead. You don't give, you're dead. Okay, but may the Eibishter be makabel all of our tefillas.